Welcome to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission. This is your gateway to insights and inspiration as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. It's actually not planned out. This is very spur of the moment, and I am liking it. So while I am liking this part, you should be liking the show. Subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bells, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. We are going to be talking a little bit about courage today, and I'm going to bring in Mike here. Can you give me a quick little rundown, who you are, where you come from, all that good stuff? Hit us up.
Good day, everyone. My name is Mike Wilford. I am a retired police officer, current grad student pursuing a master's in clinical psychology, and founder of a startup building AI transcription services for law enforcement.
Bam. I like it. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you?
Things are good. Speaking of a little bit of working with the robots, I do believe today's topic is courage.
Courage, yes.
All right. Well, I just talked to the robot. Here we go. Courage is the mental or moral strength to face fear, difficulty, danger, uncertainty, or pain without being paralyzed by it. It involves a willingness to take action despite discomfort or risk, often rooted in a commitment to values, principles, or a greater purpose. Courage can manifest in various forms, such as physical bravery in the face of harm, emotional strength to confront personal challenges, or moral integrity to stand up for what is right. It is not the absence of fear, but the ability to move forward in spite of it. Thank you, robot.
That's a great definition. Thank you very much, Mr. Robot. Mike, what are your first thoughts on courage?
I don't know if I have first thoughts yet. I know you're going to play a video. Let me wrap my head around the video first, because 4 minutes ago, I didn't know I was coming on here, and my coffee is broken. So
3 minutes ago, I learned it was courage, and I came in with the coffee. I came in with
go.
the courage of my own coffee, you know?
Yeah, we came in set. So, okay, well, let's get into the video, and then we can discuss it from there. Here we go.
Argued that there are 4 classical virtues. There's wisdom, justice, self-control, and courage. And of these, his account of courage is one of the most insightful passages in his Republic. Because for Plato, courage is not what most people think it is. Courage is not the same as fearlessness, nor is it something born to some people and denied others. For Plato, courage is the ability to recognize what's valuable or not, and what should be feared. For instance, courage is when you fear losing a loved one more than your health or your wealth. It's when you see fairness or justice as greater than popularity. A young child who does not know the dangers of life is not brave, they just don't know what they should fear yet. A lion defending her pride is mighty, but she's not courageous. Courage is having the wisdom or the judgment to place one set of values above another. And for Plato, this must be trained or taught in our schools and by the state. We must teach children what are the valuable things in life, that justice, fairness, wisdom, love, and friendship are more important than wealth, lust, and the self. From our earliest years, we must see that some things in life need defending. We need to protect those things. So courage can take many forms. It's in the greatest of acts or in the quietest of words. It's an Arthurian knight defending his honour, or a protester fighting for justice. It's a small girl standing up to a bully in the playground. Courage is knowing what's right and why right is important.
I really like that last line. Courage is knowing what's right. I think that's really interesting, and what's important. I think it's fantastic. Mike, you got any first thoughts on that?
now I have thoughts. So it strikes me, and you kind of said it there, but I'm going to dumb it down because that's what I do. Without courage, you can't have, in my view, you can't have any of those other things. Without courage, you can't have wisdom. Without courage, you can't have self-control. Without courage, you can't have justice. Wisdom comes with knowing what you don't know. And sometimes that takes courage to admit what you don't know. self-control and controlling your emotions and controlling your actions also takes courage to do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons. And I mean, we could talk a whole hour or 2 hours about justice, so I'll leave that one for now. But those are my first thoughts.
We had a show on justice a little while ago with Seb, and it was just fantastic. We got some really great stuff. Sean, you got any thoughts on this?
So one of the references was to a young girl, I think, defending herself from bullying on the playground or something like that. That is courageous, unless she freaking does it every day. Like, what's her normal operating state? You know what I mean? So let's pretend that there's a young girl on the playground defending herself every day, and then it becomes her job to defend the playground for everyone else. And then now it's just her standard issue day. Now it isn't courageous anymore if that's her SOP. And so to me, courage is stepping above and beyond your SOP to do things that are outside of the norm that fall into the framework of the definition of courage. So to me, maybe courage is stepping outside of yourself to execute higher or above yourself or bigger than yourself or more than yourself, whatever word you want to use in there, than your daily SOP.
I remember we had a conversation with Craig Weller at one point in time, and he was saying that if you're just doing a thing, if you have no fear going into whatever it is you're doing, it removes the capacity for it to be a courageous act because you're not actually fearing the moment. So you require fear in order for it to be courageous. And I'm wondering how much of this goes into some of the jobs that we do. So, for instance, when I was in the military, I never really feared walking mine lanes. It wasn't until we had the added stuff of working IEDs. And I'm wondering, Mike, working the streets as a police officer, did you wake up every day afraid, or was it became a normal act to what Sean's talking about, where it becomes less courageous? What do you think? You got to unmute yourself though first.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I think kind of what you're saying, there's a difference between courage and stupid. Like, being fearless is sometimes great. Being fearless is sometimes willful blindness. Yeah, I was afraid lots of times on the job. And you know, like we said, like it's been said a number of times, courage is being fearful and moving forward anyway, or words to that effect. There's all kinds of ways to be courageous, but there's all kinds of ways to be stupid as well. Going into clear a house, going into an active shooter scenario, going into the kind of stuff that you guys have gone into. It's normal to be fearful. That doesn't mean that you're panicked. Doesn't mean that you're unable to function. That's what training and stress inoculation is for. Doesn't mean you're not still afraid. It just means you're afraid and you do it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, you got a point on this?
Just that training, like Mike said, training and stress inoculation, skill sets and all of that good stuff, that can get you in the game of courage. But I don't think it'll get you very far down the line or down the lane of courage unless you have the bolt-on addition of for the reason, for the why. And so as you stand there on the courage start line about to go do that thing, the door, the burning building, the breaking up a fight on a playground, whatever the case is, as you're standing there on the courage start line, not enough people cross the courage start line because they don't know why they need to cross the line. Because they don't have a higher calling, because they don't have a bigger purpose than themselves. It's rare that you see people constantly demonstrate courage just for themselves, unless you've learned how to do that. And so one of the ways I've found that someone can start to understand what courage means, and then how to encourage and then how to engage in the courage game, is to make it all about someone else, to make it all about the person that you're going to save, the person that you're going to help, the team that needs your support. And so rather than thinking it's my moment to be courageous, you can kind of flip it on its head and say, it's my moment to help others. And that can get you down the courage pipeline.
It made me think of, you're going to laugh, but it made me think of BJJ. Specifically, when people first start, this is with anything. This is joining the police forces, joining the military. This is engaging in something that they've never done before. The act itself is courageous. And I wanted to touch on that, but eventually it dilutes itself to no longer being courageous because you enter a level of normalcy, right? You are, stepping my first step into basic training perhaps was courageous, but stepping my 18th or 19th or 200th step going through basic training was less courageous because I entered into a level of normalcy. And I'm wondering, do you think that normalcy prevents people from getting into future courageous acts, that they've just kind of accepted they've done the one hard thing and like, okay, cool, I'm good to go, and they can just kind of coast on that for the rest of their life? Mikey, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. I think you can do, and there are people that do this. They do one hard thing, they do one courageous thing, and believe that that makes them courageous by definition. And the level of courage it takes to do those hard things certainly does diminish over time. I mean, the first thing that pops into my head is skydiving. I have a fear of heights. I have never jumped out of a plane before. I don't know that I ever will. But I suspect, I'm assuming both of you have in your careers, I suspect that the first time, and even the second and not maybe the 10th time, took a whole bunch of courage. But the 100th time, and when you're teaching other people to do it, it takes far less courage to do that. It doesn't make you less of a courageous person, but doing something that you're no longer afraid of, while still admirable, is not necessarily courageous.
Shaun, you have experience with this. What are you thinking?
I do. I got two thoughts. The first one is I'll address what Mike just said because it's a really great point. So, yeah, I have jumped out of a plane. I've jumped out of a plane nearly 400 times. But the first time that I jumped out of a plane was on my basic parachutist course. And as it turns out, because I was topping the course or doing so well in the course, that they made me the candidate that was going to be the first guy to jump out of the plane on the course. So the very first jump, I was the stick leader in the door waiting for that green light to turn. And I was freaking out of my mind. And there was two instructors next to me. One was staring me right in the Mark 1 eyeballs, ensuring that I was about to go, getting me all jazzed up and et cetera, et cetera. And I didn't know if I was going to go because I'd never been tested that way before. But I have a very, very unusual fear of heights. I am not mortified by heights, but you get me halfway up a 6-foot ladder and I am not happy. And I've done a lot of height work. I've rappelled off of things. I've done all the things. And so I do not like being more than 3 feet above the ground. It messes with my little squirrel brain. But every single time that it happens, I have to put that stuff in check. I have to clamp it down. And the reason that I clamp it down and get on with the job is, just like my first jump, there was a bunch of guys behind me. We were nose to tail ready to go out that door. And if I hadn't gone out, then I don't know what would have happened to the guy behind me. Would he have quit as well? And so my job in the moment was to kick that ass, my own, and make sure that I was representing appropriately so no one behind me failed. And so I went out the door, of course, as one does, as did everyone else, as they do. And that is the way of life. Every time we get to these branching points, we get to decide, are we doing it for me? And that can be enough. Or am I doing it for those behind me? And that should be enough. And so between those two things, if you think about yourself and those around you, that should be almost a doubling down of getting you across the courage line. Something that I want to add, Chance, is you'd drawn the example of when you were working mines, scanning for mines, trying to detect explosives. And so that is courageous until it becomes commonplace. And then when it becomes commonplace, that is cowardly. And I'm using two strong words because it'll help kind of polarize the idea in some people's minds. That even in the moment where you're doing things that look like you're doing amazing work and that your courage is off the charts, and as you see someone in that position, you're thinking, there's no way I would ever do that. That's the external perspective. For the person who's out there in the minefield, Chance, doing a scan, he's either being courageous or he's being cowardly in that moment. And you'll never know unless you have a really keen eye. Because a coward will just do their job and not explore the moment or not expand beyond their abilities or not try to do 101%. They'll play it safe with 99%. And I'm using numbers to create an example. The coward doesn't try to do more. They just do what they have to do rather than do that extra thing. Do that extra safe scan. Scan an extra 6 inches to the left and right, even though it might put themselves at risk. You can play it safe down your line and still do your job. Or you can explore on either side of the line and do your job plus courage, if that makes sense.
I'm tracking that for sure. Mike, you got any thoughts on it?
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with the word cowardly there. So I'm going to play the contrarian. I feel like I could safely do that when you're hundreds of miles away from me, Shaun. I'm not putting myself in any danger by doing so. But going back to what I said at the beginning of this conversation, there's a difference between being courageous and being stupid. If you are, and to put this in context, I've never been in the military, so I can't relate to the things that I know you guys have done. But I'm going to try to talk like I have a little bit of knowledge of it. So if you're clearing a minefield or searching for IEDs or something along those lines, and you're not giving it that extra 1% or 10%, then that's stupid, because you're not there for the right reasons. You're doing it for your paycheck. You're doing it because you think it's cool. You're not doing it to protect the people that you're there to protect. You're not doing it to keep your brothers and sisters in uniform safe. You're not doing it to keep the Indigenous population safe. You're doing it because somebody told you to do it. And if you're not doing it for the right reasons, then don't do it. Let someone who is courageous do it. But I define that as stupid as opposed to cowardly.
I want to play with kind of both of these words too, because I think we have especially in the Western world, we have a bit of a skewed version of fear, cowardice, stupidity, courage, things like that, is just due to the fact that in our popular culture, in our movies, in our media, we get the kind of the gross look of it, right? You're looking at courage as a whole, and when people think of courage, they think of like a last charge against the enemy, or really big stakes and people doubling down anyway, things like that, where it becomes quite large. But I think what we're talking about here is the small choices that whether make something courageous or not, and it's more about choosing the right thing to do in the moment, regardless of the perceived outcome, at least in my mind. And so using a mine lane or even clearing a house or something like that, where there's a number of unknowns, entering into that is a choice. But then it's about all the little choices in between that make someone courageous or not, at least in my mind. Shaun, what do you think?
Yeah, that's precisely the point I was trying to make using the mine sweeping as an example. Is and I did use strong words, courage and cowardly, and the reason I use those words is to again create a polarizing moment, or to create strong reaction in a person's mind for them to think about, well, did I really act courageous in that moment, or did I really act cowardly? And Chance, your point of either going into a room and clearing it or going down a mine lane and clearing it, it's the little things that matter. You can do your job, and that is neither courageous nor cowardly, I suppose, but just doing your job, the bare minimum of doing your job, that's just getting by. And to me, when lives are at risk, and maybe this is a more important distinction than just mopping a hallway, when there's lives at risk, I don't think anyone has the luxury of running themselves down a neutral lane of, well, I'm not being courageous and I'm not being cowardly, I'm just doing my job. If it's mopping a hallway, there's less consideration for courage and cowardly. But when lives are at risk, and particularly when there's kinetic energy involved, I think you kind of have to decide on which side of the line you want to be on in order to kind of push that pace, the extra pace, as it were.
Yeah, that extra step. Mike, what were you going to say?
I was going to comment on one thing you said, Chance. You mentioned it's about the little choices that you make in that moment. You know, when you're on the mine lane or when you're clearing the house. I'll just add that I think it's also equally as important are the choices that you make that got you to that place. Joining the military was a courageous decision because you know likely where you're going to end up. Choosing the trades that you guys chose once you got there is a courageous decision. Showing up for selection, showing up for training, those are all courageous decisions that in the moment there's nothing really to be fearful of except for failure or rejection. You're probably not going to get killed in basic training. You're probably not going to get killed at selection, but that doesn't make those decisions any less courageous.
You bring up a good point. You're probably not going to. It does happen though, and there have been a number of times and stories. And Shaun, I could probably tell you a couple of some pretty close calls. But I also believe that there's I guess the beautiful part about it is that each one of those little choices builds your confidence to a point that you can then engage in more and more courageous things. Like you can engage those fears more often. But those are very physical things. So, you know, you train martial arts, you learn how to shoot, you learn how to do all the things. You can physically engage fear or physically engage confrontation, let's put it that way, which makes it simple. But I think we still have a lot of residual fears in our own head of, like you said, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of other people's perceptions, things like that, that we don't engage in. And I think that I kind of want to touch on this because a lot of the emotional stuff, especially for veterans and first responders after they get out, is a really big challenge due to the fact that we've never faced those fears. At least that's what I think. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
Well, I think that a big part of cowardliness and courage, and I keep coming back to those words, just to strike a wild left and right of arc. And I'm not saying anyone is a coward in this conversation, and we're not focusing on being a coward. I'm just using it as a contrasting word to courage. When I got into basic training at CFB and Wainwright, infantry basic training, within halfway through our course, we had a deuce and a half that rolled over, crashed, and I was in it, and 3 guys in that vehicle died, and a whole bunch of guys got super injured. I got injured. It was a mess. And so, 1 second before that vehicle went sideways through the air, I didn't understand that people could die in the job. Those were my first deaths in the military. And until that point, I didn't even know it was part of the game, other than as a kind of an ephemeral idea, almost an intellectual understanding of maybe that could happen, but I'd never seen it. I'd never stood next to dead guys before in my job. And so the harsh slap of reality will start to help you understand that in that moment, when I was in that moment, there was kind of a branching decision again of what I've been trying to say, and that was I was standing on the start line of courage, trying to deal with that accident, and I could have either been a coward or I could have demonstrate courage. And I think that a lot of life is multiple branching points like that, not just through the year, but through each day. And I've used coward and courage as really strong words to create polarization in the mind of anyone who's listening. But those two words exist almost every minute, almost every second, but just scaled back to small courage, small cowardliness. You know, when you it's 11 o'clock at night, you know you should have been in bed already. You're kind of a little peckish. You know you shouldn't eat 2 to 3 hours before you go to bed, but you stick your hand in the potato chip bag and you start pounding, and then you feel like not good. You're laying in bed, your heart rate is elevated by an extra 30 beats. You wake up in the morning, you're groggy, and so the line continues day after day. That is a form of cowardliness because you know what you're doing, you know what you're supposed to be doing, and somehow you give up on yourself in that moment in a tiny, tiny, tiny little cowardly way. Because coward and courage are such strong words, it feels uncomfortable for me to say it. And I'm betting it's feeling uncomfortable for some people who are hearing it. And so dial the words back to whatever you want to hear, whatever you need to hear, to not stick your hand in the bag of chips at 11 o'clock at night, or to do that extra thing down the mind sweeping lane that you need to do. Life is decisions. Every single moment are branching points, and we get to decide which side we want to be on, the courageous side or the cowardly side. So again, strong words, they're not the right words, but I bet it's got some people chewing on it a little bit.
It makes me think of, I don't know if you guys did this, but when I was a kid, I always pictured myself in the fantasies that I would have as a child. It would be like, I'd be playing baseball and it would be bottom of the ninth, 2 out, bases loaded, you're down by 3. Like, it creates these big moments. And especially as a kid, you want to be in those moments. You want to rescue the damsel. You want to slay the dragon. You want to win the game. You want to be in those critical moments that require a ton of courage because of the consequences, really. And I'm wondering, as we age, do you think that those desires change over time, or do you think they just become diluted with a lot of smaller choices to not seek those moments? What do you think, Mike? Got any thoughts?
Well, first of all, I go back to Shaun. So thank you for sharing that story, Shaun. And I'm sorry that you experienced that. That's horrible. And I was thinking while you were telling that story, that like you almost kind of defined courage in that moment because you didn't leave, you didn't quit, you saw the in real life, in person, face to face, what can happen, and you kept going, and like those are the decisions that I talk about that lead you to where you are, that are the things that define courage. Making those choices when choosing not to be courageous would be so much easier.
Easier. I like that. Shaun, you got any thoughts?
I think that the reason, Chance, you were mentioning that, save the damsel, slay the dragon, I think that gets driven into a lot of young kids through books, through movies. Today, modern kids nowadays are almost programmed to feel not the need, but to be measuring up against Thor or Superman or name any freaking Hollywood hero that has come out over the last 10 years. Kids are trying to measure up against immeasurable, like artificial, unreal heroes. And so if you can't be Thor, then what is courage in a young person's mind nowadays? And I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm trying to pull it back from an unreal Hollywood world, an artificial figure that doesn't exist, back to actual real people that are probably in your neighborhood, by the way, and they're doing heroic things every day, perhaps, that no one is aware of. And by that I mean things that they don't want to do versus things that they can do. And those things might be just getting out of their house, taking the garbage out of their house. If they haven't been able to go face the external world for several months because of some pre-existing mental health challenge, PTSD, whatever the case is, if they're struggling in their world right now, courage to me isn't them throwing on a super cape and running out their front door and leaping into the air, maybe clearing 10 feet across their garbage can like they're Superman, and then realizing they can't fly. That isn't courage. To me, courage is sitting in your chair and thinking, today's the day I'm going to go out my door and see if there's a sun out there, a sunshine moment. And cracking the door halfway open, sticking your head out, seeing the sun, and stepping back in. Doing something that is outside of your norm, something that you feel is heroic, something that you feel is Thor-like. And Thor-like means big, different, something that impresses you, not me. Don't try to impress me, impress yourself. And so courage perhaps is less about flying to the top of the Empire State Building and saving the damsel from King Kong. And it's more about going outside, taking your garbage out and nodding to your neighbor and walking back in your house. If that's something that you haven't done for a long, long time because it's been freaking you out. Courage is your world, not my world, not the Marvel Hollywood world. It's your world. And you have to figure out your left and right of arcs and go do something courageous.
You bring up a really interesting example in my head is the fact that when we moved into the place that I live now, my wife and I did something that we didn't do in our last place, which was we went over and met our neighbors. We knocked on the door and said hello and how you doing? We just moved in. What's the neighborhood like? We started engaging with our neighborhood. And because of that, we now have pretty good relationships with our neighbors. Whereas in our previous house, we didn't because it wasn't a great neighborhood. We allowed that cowardice to prevent us from engaging in our neighborhood where we probably could have done some good in the last place versus this place. So I really like this concept, and I want to throw something at you that you made me think of, which is from Wizard of Oz, the Cowardly Lion, right? And to this point, there's I think a lot of people out in the world that are just wandering around the streets as cowardly lions. They may look like a lion, but they don't act like a lion. And I think there's a really big delineation there that I want to touch on. Mike, you've had a lot of experience out on the street when you're working the beat. What do you think on this?
Well, a couple things. So first of all, I'm so glad that you guys took the conversation outside of the military and policing context, because Shaun, you're 100% right. Sometimes courage is getting up off the couch and making a salad instead of ordering a pizza, or stepping outside, or applying for the job, or asking the girl out, or whatever it looks like. Something that you're afraid to do that you know you should do, and then you go and do it anyway. It doesn't have to be clearing a minefield. It doesn't have to be running towards a gunfight. It doesn't have to be those things at all. And back to your point, Chance. Yeah, I've seen lots of lions dressed up as lions, pretending to be lions that really aren't. They like looking like a lion. They like telling people they're a lion. But when it comes time to do lion stuff, then they're not doing it. And I'm going to refrain from deep diving into that too much because I don't want to offend any listeners. And I don't want to berate any professions either, because every profession, every line of work, every community has pretenders, dressed up as lions or dressed up as whatever the thing is that they want to be, but they're not actually doing it. Everybody wants to be a gangster until it's time to do gangster shit.
Isn't that the way? Shaun, you got any additional points on this?
Well, it is the way. I mean, it is the way. I mean, it's so pervasive. It's so pervasive that it's the norm. And so, okay, someone wants to appear to be a gangster. Cool. That's on them. But it's more than that, actually. It's more than just on them. It's now on society, because either the younger crew that's coming up that's observing that now thinks that that's the way it's run. That's the game. The game is faking it till you make it rather than making it without faking it. And so it creates a follow-on or a ripple-on effect through younger generations. And it creates it within your peers. And so there's no upside to someone who's faking it. There's no upside. You got to go make it happen rather than faking it happening. And I think that another piece, again, to use strong words, another piece is when you see that happening, having the courage to say, dude, dial it back. Or having the cowardice to nod and smile and say, good job. Keep on keeping on. I think that we all have to hold each other accountable. And if you see someone faking it and popularizing whatever fakery, you got to put it in check. That is a form of courage when you call someone out. And I'm not saying you've got to be a goof about it. You just got to let someone know, bro, you're talking out of line. You've never held a spear in your life, but you're talking about how to throw a spear in the Olympics. So dial it back. If you let things like that go, what it does is it creates a disservice to the community, and it creates a disservice within yourself. Because every day you see that fool talking about how to use a spear online or in the community or in your neighborhood, whatever, every time you see it and let it slide, it's impacting you. You know that by letting it go, you are to some degree condoning it. You're almost green lighting it. And so observing someone who's acting like a lion, but is the furthest thing from it, is one subject. But not doing anything about it is condoning it. And that's a whole different subject.
Yeah, I agree. And I think I just want to make this point too, is the fact that what we're talking about is not something that we are exempt from. I look back as early as, 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, I was doing the exact same thing in certain areas of my life, right? If I was being the coward, I was making improper choices. I was doing things that were preventing me from being courageous within my own life. How I handled my kids, how I handled my relationship with my wife, how I managed the relationship with my own self. And in these last couple of years, especially with the collective and doing all these awesome conversations, I've been held accountable. And I think the courageous thing in those moments for being held accountable is to accept it. Yep. Okay. You know what? You're right. I didn't make the right choice here. I'm going to do this better today and the next day and the next day and the next day. So I want to just point out the fact that for those that are listening, it's not like we're trying to speak down to the world of being like, everybody needs to be more courageous. We've all been there, and we've all made those choices before. We're coming from experience, and that this is not a simple thing. Let me rephrase. It's not an easy thing, but it's simple choices to do what you know is right. And I saw this really great meme online at one point in time, and it was just it was a discussion of how to help someone out of a rough time, and it is, ask yourself this question: what is the next right thing, whatever that thing is for you in this moment? So you guys were talking earlier about the fact of just getting out of bed, getting off the couch, making a better meal, stepping outside for some fresh air and some sunlight, get some vitamin D into you, whatever it is. What is the next right thing for you? And I think that leads into a courageous decision-making paradigm. If you're continually looking for the next right thing to do, allows yourself to carry on that courageous acts day to day.
There is a spot between the two, though. If I can add, there is a liminal space. So using the example, and it's just an artificial construct. Someone's on their couch, they're struggling to get outside. They haven't been outside for a good long time. So they crack their door open, stick their head out, get a bit of sunlight on them, and then they step back into their house and sit back down on the couch. There's this liminal space now after that moment, and that is called reflection. And how long you take to reflect on what just happened, how much value it had for you, how much better or not of a person it made you in that moment. These are things that you have to kind of contextualize against. Did I enjoy the sun on my face? Is it good for me? I think it is. I think I'm going to do it tomorrow again. What's the importance of me doing it again tomorrow? Why am I engaging in this? All of these questions, all of this self-reflection, that liminal space where you sit back on your couch after the fact and think, what just happened? If this, then that. Who, what, when, where, why, how. However you want to ask yourself the question in that liminal moment, you have to take it. However long it takes, 1 second, 1 minute, 1 day, who cares? You can't go do the thing and then not think about the thing, particularly when it's things like that, where you're step changing or making a difference in your life. So do a thing, then sit down and think about the thing, and then repeat the thing maybe the next day. That liminal space has to exist.
Yeah, I agree with that one. Mike, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, the power of reflection is exponential in those situations. Do the hard thing that you don't want to do, and then remind yourself that maybe it wasn't that hard, or it was hard and you did it anyway. Give yourself that pat on the back. Whatever the thing is, if it's getting off the couch or if it's jumping out of the plane, whatever it is, take that reflection, that introspective look at yourself. Because without that, you're not learning anything. You're just blindly doing things and not. We said at the very beginning of this conversation, you gotta have your why. Otherwise, you're not doing anybody any service.
And I'm going to throw in here as well a little bit of balance, because if we can turn ourselves into cowardly lions pretty quickly if we say, "Oh, I got off that couch today." Little pat on the back. Yeah, I'm courageous. And then you do it again tomorrow. Oh, good courageous act. Well done. And pretty soon we go right back to what we were talking about earlier, is the fact that you're not doing anything courageous. You know you can get off the couch. You've done it a million times. Well, now you're leaning into the cowardly act of doing the same thing you've always done. Again, courage requires fear. So you have to be afraid of the outcome, even to the slightest degree, for that to be a courageous act. And so I want to throw in some balance there, that you're absolutely right. The reflection is key. Giving yourself a little pat on the back is good. But if it's done too many times, then you're slacking a little bit. Shaun, what are you thinking?
Yeah, and the other side of the coin is, if you're used to a whole pile of kinetic energy action, like your day is just bonkers. Maybe like Mike, you're in your squad car, you're full tilt from start of shift to end of shift. You barely got time to breathe. If that's your norm, you're kind of now used to that sort of operational tempo, that kinetic energy. If you're used to that jam, then you're not showing courage in that moment if that's your norm. Like, from start to finish, it's full tilt. Every day's full tilt. Every year's full tilt. If you're used to full tilt, do you know what is courageous? Is not being full tilt. It's sitting down and being with yourself in the silence and going full tilt on yourself rather than full tilt on the job or full tilt on raising a dog or full tilt learning how to fly a glider. Whatever it is, a distraction, I'll call it. The things that can be courageous for some can be distractions for others. And sometimes people need those distractions so they don't have to face themselves. And the reason they don't want to face themselves is because they don't have the courage to sit with themselves in the silence and be courageous. And so humans are complex, and there is no one simple definition of, well, that person's courageous and that person's a coward, because these things change year by year. They change month by month. They change week by week. And it's for you to observe yourself as to what is the courageous act in this moment and what is the cowardly act in this moment. And it changes, I believe, on a day-to-day basis if you are very aware of yourself.
That's a great point. Mike, you got something to add on that?
Yeah, I agree 100%. And like, I don't think there is any such thing as a courageous person or a brave person. They do brave things, they do courageous things, and sometimes they do cowardly things, and sometimes they do stupid things. I know I worked with lots of great cops that their personal life was an absolute mess because they were not making courageous decisions in their personal life. And I'm not throwing stones at anybody. That I have made all kinds of mistakes in my personal and professional life. So I don't pretend to be 100% brave or courageous in either of those roles. But it's just about the next right thing, exactly like you said, Chance, the next right thing, whether it's the next right thing at work, the next right thing with your kids, the next right thing with your spouse. Continuing to do those things is the only way anybody can ever truly become a courageous person.
I like how you pointed that out, that I don't think anybody's a courageous person up until they're no longer around. I think in retrospect, someone can be a courageous person, but on the day-to-day, you guys are right in the fact that it's about courageous actions or cowardly actions. It's about the little things, like we were saying earlier. It's the little choices that you make throughout your day, the little things that we do. It reminds me very early on, Shaun, when you first started getting on the internet and you used to sit there and be like, oh, I got to look in the eye of Sauron. And you're looking on your phone and doing your camera and stuff. Those were courageous actions because there was a lot of fear there. There was a lot, fear maybe is not the right word, but there was a lot of...
No, it's the right word.
There you go.
It's the right word for sure.
Yeah.
I was hating on it. I still don't actually care for it from time to time, but I was hating on it way back in the day. And I was hating on it for a whole pile of reasons. And one of the reasons was because I sucked at it. I was terrible at podcasting. I was terrible at live chats. I was terrible at talking to an audience that I didn't understand. I was terrible talking to the Eye of Sauron. I just didn't get it. And it didn't feel right. And I hated it. But as I was saying earlier, courage is not about what I want in that moment. It's about what the team needs. It was me standing in the aircraft door, staring at a red light, waiting for it to turn green, and being scared witless about that next moment where I would have to punch my right foot down on the actual jump platform and throw myself into the abyss with a parachute on my back. That was a moment that I was freaking out on, just like the Eye of Sauron, freaking out on. The why of the moment is what kept me going back day after day, kept me going back jump after jump, kept me going back podcast after podcast. As anyone knows who does this sort of stuff, none of us will ever be rich, famous, or admired for any of this stuff, because none of us are in that game anyway. We're not doing it for that reason. This is purely and entirely for me, for the team. It's all about the team. And so if I couldn't understand what the team is behind podcasting, I freaking would have bounced. There's no way I would be here right now if I was just chirping. And so it has to be something more than just the three of us. It has to be more than just me. It has to be something bigger. And not just bigger in the sense of a million people who may watch this. I just need one person who's going to benefit from it. Because putting out stuff, doing things, that is okay, I suppose, for some people. But I'm looking for something that is going to be so helpful that you're almost reaching down from the mountaintop and grasping someone's fingers and just barely pulling them up the mountain and saving their life, saving the moment, being a hero. And to be a hero in the moment, you've got to convince yourself that you're being courageous. And everyone talks about Joseph Campbell's hero's journey. Just be a hero in your own movie, bro. But no one wants to be a courageous hero. They just have this avatar that they're chasing, this movie idea that they are going to be a thing. I'm going to be Thor in my own life. But they don't twig onto the simple fact that if you just be courageous in the next minute for someone else or for yourself, that's the hero's journey. I think people have got it flippity flopped. The hero's journey in some people's minds is this big, unimaginable, grand entrance and exit, when really it's the tiny, insignificant moments throughout the day where you get to be a coward or you get to be courageous. That's the hero's journey in my mind.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Now, Mike, I know you got a hard time in right now, so I wanted to give you an opportunity. Any final thoughts, anything at all on anything we've talked about or anything that Sean's going over? Oh, you got to unmute yourself, though.
It's a good thing I'm trying to build a tech company because I'm so handy with technology. I'm just going to go back to the cowardly lion metaphor, and I think no one of these characteristics is mutually exclusive. There are lots of people who do lots of brave things, but as an example, I was fully wearing my fuzzy lion suit when I first started realizing I probably have PTSD or something going on with me, because I pretended I was fine, told everybody I was fine. I avoided therapy like the plague, but yet preached the benefits of therapy to anybody who would listen. I was faking it big time, and not faking it until I made it, just faking it. And when I finally decided, okay, I actually am gonna break if I don't go talk to somebody. That still wasn't even brave in that moment, because by then I had no choice. It wasn't like I all of a sudden put on a brave face and I'm gonna make an appointment and I'm gonna go unload my stuff to this stranger. That was not brave in that moment at all. It was a necessity that I was compelled to do, or I was gonna break. That wasn't brave. So it doesn't matter how many brave things you do in the moment. We all still have our cowardly lion suit. Some of us have it hanging in the closet. Some of us wear it every day. Some of us bring it out once a week, whether we need it or not.
Absolutely. Sean, what are you going to say?
Yeah, but the great aspect of what you just said, Mike, is that a handful of minutes before we started this podcast, you weren't even on the podcast. And then within an hour, you're already like courageously externally stating what you just stated. And that takes courage to do. It takes courage to jump into a podcast like this on short notice and then say what you just said. Not too many people do that kind of stuff. Like it's not 99 in 100 people that act accordingly as you just did. And to me, that is courage. And so, as I was stating earlier, cowardliness and courage are just really strong words to help someone understand that each moment we have to choose which side of the line we're on. Being courageous doesn't mean fireworks and F-16s are going to go off behind you as you're being courageous. It just means that you know, we know, everyone knows that in a tiny way, you chose the right side of the line. And by saying what you just said, Mike, you're on the right side of the line. And whether anyone understands that out there or not, I suppose is neither here nor there. It's helpful if they understand that. But you understand it, Mike. And that's the important part, is throughout our day, delineating what to us, what to me, what to Shaun, my understanding of what Shaun's courage is and what Shaun's cowardliness is. And I think that not enough people take these things into consideration.
Yeah. You're trying to tell me that I'm not going to get F-16s blowing up stuff behind me? Like, I thought that was part of the parcel. Okay.
If that was possible, it would have happened when I had my kung fu fight up on top of the hill in Nanaimo when I was a young buck. Hey?
Oh man, that would have been amazing. That would have just added to the whole moment. Well, Mike, Shaun, I really appreciate this convo. I know it was the last minute, but it turned out really well. And Mike, I know you got to run, so we'll shut her down here. Shaun, you got any final thoughts before we kill her for the afternoon?
No, thanks, Mike. Thanks for joining on short notice, and thanks for being cool as hell in this combo.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always a pleasure. And you guys always make me look way smarter than I am, so I appreciate that too.
Well, I always appreciate you having you on. We're going to get you on more often as well, so be on the lookout for my messages because it's going to be great. And I will just finish this off the same way we always do it, as we all continue to learn, build, and grow. We'll see you next time. Chimo.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.